Well, hello and welcome to the second ever episode of the Purple Door podcast, a friend's rewatch pod. I'm your host, Alasdair, alongside my good friend, DeeAnn. Hello, DeeAnn.
Hello, Al. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Well,
Great.
DeeAnn, is first time on this podcast, is a former co-worker of mine. DeeAnn, how was your Christmas and New Year?
It was fantastic, busy, crazy, like nonstop. But currently, right now, I'm enjoying our snow day.
Yeah, so DeeAnn and I are both educators and we live, 10 or 15 miles from each other. So we're both enjoying this snowy weather, which has been, we're both at home. So we can record this episode a little earlier than planned. Today we're going to be discussing the one with the sonogram at the end. So I'm excited to get stuck into the episode with you. But first and foremost, let's play a little Bamboozled. We have 3 questions for each other. And why don't you ask one of your questions first?
All right. So my first question for you is, what age is Ross working on at the very beginning of the episode? They're putting together the prehistoric set whenever Carol shows up. Do you remember?
Oh, that
Yeah.
is such a good question because, of course, I can picture the scene.
Uh-huh.
And he says something to his co-worker about, they're really just worried about glaciers or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Not trying to get the
Some,
mastodon smell out of the carpet.
yes. You know what? I don't remember. What is the answer?
The Stone Age.
I should have written that down. I didn't know that. All right. Well, my first question to you is, when Rachel first enters Barry's dental office, what is the name of the boy having the dental work done?
Oh no.
Aha!
Ah. Man, and I see him, he's in the chair and he's and she's like, I broke up with him, and he's like, uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Oh man, and he's got glasses. Oh man, Tyler? I don't
It
think
is not.
so.
It's so frustrating, isn't it? His name
Right,
is Robbie. He is Robbie. I
Robbie.
think it might be Weinberg, but that might be the kid in the other room. His name is Robbie.
Wow,
All right,
that's
so
a
we're
good
we're
question.
0 for
Hey.
1 each. All right, what's your second
All right,
question?
I feel like this one should be easy.
That's some
Who
pressure.
finds the ring in the lasagna?
All right, let me think this through. Because I can picture the scene. I know Chandler says, boys, we're going in, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But I've got to go with Joey. He's got to eat the most.
Nope, it's
No!
actually Phoebe. And
Phoebe finds it.
she pulls it out and she's like, found it. And it's right after Ross has come to the door.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hi, Sad Sack Ross, who we'll talk about. God,
Oh
that's 0
God.
for 2. So those are
Yes.
quality questions.
Yeah, we're doing great.
So far, well, let me see. So there's when they're in the OBGYN's room, what are the first 2 names that Carol suggests? She suggests
I can
several.
tell you because that's one of my questions
I
I
knew that would happen.
wrote. Marlon or Minnie?
Marlon, exactly. Yes. So you get 1, and I knew this would was bound to happen at some point, and we made
Yes.
it to our first episode where we'd come up with the same question. So I'll ask you one more.
Okay.
What does Phoebe describe the unborn child in the sonogram as? What does she think the sonogram looks like?
They're watching it on the TV.
Yep.
And she turns her head and she's like, if you squint your eyes and turn your head to the side, he looks like an old potato.
An old potato it is. Look at you go.
Okay. All right. Here's a fun one.
Okay.
What character makes their appearance in the first scene as a background character?
Well, I know the first scene. Now, is this when they're in Central Park?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know, but I'm going to guess Gunther.
You're right, it is Gunther.
Yes,
He's in the back, waiting on a customer, and
and
that's the very
kind of
first time we see Gunther.
that I did not know. So as I said on the first episode, I love Friends. I've watched it since it came out in the mid 90s, but I don't claim to be like a super fan who knows all the stuff. So I'm
Right.
kind of utilizing this podcast to read about the show and find out more stuff, and that I did not know.
Yes.
I know that he wasn't an actor. He was a barista, and they brought him in because he'd be able to use the stuff. So
Yes.
that is brand new information. That's
There you go.
fantastic.
So he made his first appearance on episode 2.
On episode 2. I will now never ever forget that. That's awesome. Well, I love those questions. Those were fantastic.
They were. Yours were so
Yeah.
good too, especially the name one, right?
The name one because
That's a good
I tested
question.
them out on Kate earlier, and she gave me the name of. They mentioned some other names, but I was really hoping you'd get the
Oh,
first two, which you did. That's awesome.
yes. Oh, like,
So why
oh,
don't we dive into this episode? The first scene, as you just said, they're in Central Park, and they're talking about. It looks like it's like the importance of kissing in the opening act. It's a
yeah.
funny conversation to have.
It is. Okay, and here's something that I thought was so funny, because I listened to the first podcast with you and Steve, and y'all were talking about, Steve was talking about, like, how he was 12 whenever he watched that, or he watched that first, and a lot of the jokes and stuff,
Hmm.
they were probably geared for a couple of years or older. And I was a couple of years older, and I remember this episode because it was brand new. It had just like it was had just gotten like a bunch, and my parents were like, we should watch it. So we turned it on, and I remember that scene, and we were all like, well, this is awkward. And then we turned it
Right.
off.
Right. It's such to me. It's a weird, awkward scene to begin with, but
Yeah,
um,
but it's I don't know. So many years later, whenever I
mhm.
actually watched the series, because I didn't watch it until it was in reruns. Um, but it's so funny, and the opening act, and you'll find yourself listening to the record at home alone.
Right. It's got kind of those hidden meanings that are very funny.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. Well, we move from there into the museum. We're kind of getting into the meat of the episode, where Carol shows. Well, now we know it's the Stone Age, thanks to your question. They're
Yep.
setting up that scene where Carol shows up. But of course, this is not the Carol that we get to know later on. This actress, Anita Barone, I believe,
Hmm.
the only episode she was in, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But I wanted your opinion on the timeline of this because I think it's weird that she's pregnant. She's referred to as Ross's ex-wife. So are they already divorced? They were obviously, this is a family-friendly podcast, intimate, not a couple of months prior. So was she
Right.
with Susan? I would love to hear your thoughts about the kind of timeline because I've got some thoughts on this.
Huh. So that's an interesting question because
I
I
could be
don't know that.
overthinking this completely.
Well, no, I don't think so. I don't think so because I think it's also important to kind of remember whenever they first started the episode or the series, they didn't know that it would be the hit that it was going to be, and that the
Right.
lines would go on and everything else. Um, but I am I making it up in my head, but I feel like later in the season their divorce is final.
So
But I
I'm not
think
sure. I'm
oh,
not sure. I don't remember them talking about the divorce, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
well, and Ross had a couple of divorces be final throughout the series.
Right.
So that's oh man. Yeah, that's interesting because I just figured they were separated but and filed for divorce because she had already moved in with Susan. Her and
So
Susan were together.
yeah. So
Y-
that was my kind of thought. That was that even though they're referring to each other as ex-wife and ex-husband, that it's probably not official. It's probably in the works, and it does seem pretty amicable. Um,
Mhm.
I can't help but wonder, and this is me being very skeptical here, if Carol almost used Ross to try and have a baby for her and Susan.
Do you know I would not be surprised about that? And maybe Carol, but more so Susan, right? Because there's
Yeah,
something about Susan that makes her I I don't know. She seems like kind of a controlling, kind of manipulative type like
a
that.
little bit. So I, I I'm trying not to be skeptical, but I just wonder if there was a bit of manipulation because Ross clearly loves Carol, and he seems like a nice guy, and the divorce seems amicable to all of that stuff. So I'm just curious, and maybe more, like I said, I'm overthinking it. And maybe when the writers wrote this episode 30 years ago, they weren't thinking there would be people analyzing it, the way that they are. But I don't know. It's just something that sat with me that I thought that's the timing of it all seems a little funny.
It does, because you know that they had already met at the gym and they were talking and kinda she was having a thing on the side. And
Yes.
so, man, that's gonna make me, as I'm rewatching this series, look at
Right.
them in a completely different light.
So I like I said, I've not been doing much deep diving deliberately until we get ready to review the episodes, and I did a little bit on this, and there does seem to be there's people who feel that yeah they're kind of skeptical, thinking that they manipulated Ross, but also he ends up walking Susan down the aisle. No spoilers in the later episode, or Carol, sorry, Carol. And then Susan does say a couple of things like, "You did a really nice thing today," and they do seem to kind of mend some fences of some sort.
Mhm.
I don't know. It was just a thought I had um,
Wow.
while watching that. Now they move from there into, let's see, into Monica's apartment where she's furious and cleaning as her parents are
And
coming over.
fluffing the pillows.
And the reaction was that Phoebe or Chandler says something and she stares them down. You know,
About the ball. She's like, "What is
yeah,
that?"
yes, the ball. That's
He's
right, the
like,
ball of
"Ha,
paper.
I wrote myself a note, I didn't need it, I crunched it up, and now I wish I was dead."
That's right. It's like they're an old married couple already. Like I think
Oh,
it's just brilliant.
yes, and I don't think that probably they had that relationship planned from the very beginning, but
Right.
it was such a natural progression. That's, like, my favorite relationship in the whole series.
Absolutely, because it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel there's no huge
Yes,
drama. It's a very positive
yes.
thing.
Followed closely by Phoebe and, the guy she ends up marrying. I can't think of his name right
With
now. I wanna
Mike.
call him Paul, but that
Yeah,
Mike.
that's yeah,
Yes,
Paul
Mike.
Rudd. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
yeah, for me, Monica and Chandler's the healthy relationship. I really like it a lot.
yes.
But I did have a question for you. So we get introduced to ugly naked guy in this scene
With
where
his
he's got
Thigh
his thigh
Master.
master. I would love to hear about a fad item you have bought, maybe from like an as seen on TV or something you bought thinking this is going to change my life, and it ended up being a regretful decision.
Oh gosh, Al, that's
Yeah,
embarrassing. There are
come on
so
now.
many things that are impulse buys and,
Right?
things like that. I mean, back in the day, I bought some Abs of Steel where it came on the
Yes.
VHS tape,
Yes.
and I'm sure it's perfectly preserved wherever it is that it got packed away to.
Has it been moved from house to house as you?
Yeah. No, do you know what was a good one? Was an ab roller. Did you ever
Yes.
see do you remember those? Like, where
Yes.
you lay down and those were
Yes.
silly. Yes.
That's awesome. I was
Yes.
thinking about this because Kate and I are both at the station of life where we sometimes think that a new pillow will solve all of our ailments that we've ever had. And there's the
Right.
running joke, oh, my stomach's upset. Ah, you just need a new pillow. So I think we've both bought several new pillows over the years that we think are going to be that will solve all of our problems. And of
Did
course,
you
they never do.
but have you bought a My Pillow?
I think so. I think so. The guy on the commercial with the really big,
Right.
like, brush mustache, and he's hugging the
Yes.
pillow. Yeah.
I
I
mean, I have thought I have gotten too distracted before I actually hit purchase on that one, but I
right.
could totally see that happening.
That's awesome. Well, we kind of move on, and let's see. I think Ross comes into that point, and he says that Carol is pregnant. Again, it rubs me the wrong way that they'll let me be involved, or they're giving me the choice to be involved. right, you're the dad. You're going to be involved in this kid's life. But that's just, you
Well,
know,
but that also goes back to your thought about if it was a manipulative situation to begin with, where it's like, he's kind of the side character in this family that's being created, you
right.
know?
And maybe could be manipulative, or maybe, yeah, they just haven't established kind of who fits where in this dynamic of everybody yet.
Yeah.
2 episodes in. Well, we kind of flash forward a few hours, I guess. We're still in Monica's and Rachel's apartment where we meet the Gellers, Mr. and Mrs. Geller, for the first time. Do you have any thoughts on them when we first meet them?
Ah, well, okay. So my only thought about them is that they seem such stereotypical Southern parents, right? Where the dad's just kind of, I mean, he's a 90s sitcom dad, is what he
Right.
is. The yes, ma'am, and duh, duh, duh. And then the mom is over controlling and judgmental and all the things. But yeah, just those are some stereotypical parents, and I keep
Right.
saying that, but, like, it just it makes my skin crawl, like, everything that she says to poor Monica, and then turns to Ross, and I mean, even whenever, um well, we'll get to that, but,
Yeah,
when
they
they're
are very
going off.
stereotypical, though, aren't they? They're,
Yeah,
there's to me, especially Mr. Geller, Jack. There's a lot of love there. He's got that harmonica nickname for her.
yes.
I quite like that line about there's what even though I mean it's sexist. There's nothing short of it when he sort of says some of these women who want it all. I'm so glad that's not our harmonica, and basically you're the kind of person that won't get cancer because you're not
Yeah,
trying to do
yeah,
everything.
you're
It's
content like a cow.
He's right, incredibly sexist and outdated. But the cancer line I thought was quite funny. But
Mhm.
again, I was curious about the timeline of everything because now they're sort of saying, Ross says, you're wondering what happened with Carol and I, and poor old Monica gets it again.
Oh,
You know,
yeah. You knew about this?
right? Like, there's absolutely nothing she could do, and it kind of, I don't know. She's still what I don't know, maybe 24 at this point. She's been to college. She's working in a restaurant on the career ladder, living on her own. Like, she does
But
still
it's
seem, I mean, I guess compared to Ross, who somehow has a PhD at 24 and is working in a museum, maybe she's not seen as successful, but she seems successful. She's
yeah.
she knows what she wants to do with life. She's educated, and she's working her way up.
Well, and um I wonder what plays into that because, Ross is a couple of years he's a little bit older than she is.
Hmm.
And, I lost my thought.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All good. Yeah, but I wonder
A
if
little bit
against. Yeah.
older than her, but, like, he got married and he did all these things, and then their mom, it was like almost like she was go and I this is just my thoughts, but, like,
Right.
she was gonna live vicariously through Monica, and Monica is not living the life that she would have chosen. She would have
Ye-
liked her to be married, she would have liked her to do this and that and the other, you know?
Yeah, I suppose they're cut from or they live in the same community and type of lifestyle that Rachel's parents, who Rachel was meant to go to college and then get married. That's what they were
Right.
supposed. That's the
That's what
life
you're
path.
supposed to do.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you live like that. Because I can't remember what Jack Geller's his job. Do you remember? I don't.
Mm-mm.
I need to
I
look that
don't.
up. But again, assuming they're in the same kind of tax bracket as Rachel's parents, her dad was a doctor.
See,
You'd assume he's a successful man.
yeah, I don't know though. I didn't I felt like okay, so the thing about Monica and Ross's family, I said Southern parents because
Right.
whenever I was growing up, the thought was always like Northeastern people, like they're faster and they're more liberal and they don't have all those certain expectations, But the fact that her family does and everything kind of makes me think everybody's a lot more alike than what we know. But
Right.
but what oh, but I don't think because if they had the yacht and Rachel did the yachting lessons and she had the three sisters. Like to me, it was almost like Rachel was the rich friend, and then they were,
Ah,
like, middle class, like,
right.
not, like, lower middle class at all, but I always thought Rachel, because she got the nose job, like, it they had a lot more money
Yes, and
than
she didn't she get
Rachel
a
and
pony
I
or a
mean,
horse at
Monica.
one point, I think.
Uh-huh, and so
Yes. Yeah,
I
and
don't
while
know.
the Geller's house looks very nice, we see it a couple of times, it doesn't look opulent or incredibly
Right,
fancy, so I think you might be
and
right.
they've got the Porsche, but but
Yeah,
that's
that
the
was
one thing,
his
and
classic Porsche, which
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure you could buy one for not very much if it's not running, and maybe he
r
spent time. Who knows? Who knows how he
right,
acquired that? Yeah, they're an
but
interesting couple.
mhm.
When I think of Jack Geller, I think of when he came round to Monica's after she and Richard, spoiler, looking way ahead when they split up. I always thought it was lovely that he came into the city on his wife's bridge night to kind of comfort
Yes,
Monica. Like, I think he's a good dad. Um,
yes. Aw,
and maybe they just show their love in different ways. I don't know. But after that, they go back to Central Park, and Ross and Monica kind of debriefing about their parents to Joey, Chandler, and Phoebe. And I think this is an interesting. It's not really continuity error, I suppose, because you didn't know where the show was going at this point. But I think Monica kind of checks in and clarifies that Chandler's an only child. Well, they knew each other for years when he and Ross were in college. I don't. I felt like she would have known that. Um, Whereas Rachel might not have, probably didn't know that Phoebe was a twin because they've just recently met. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, again, just
yeah,
continuity.
yeah, yes, and, like, the purpose of that one scene right there was just to give backstory for everybody else in a not
Right.
obvious. I don't know, it was a pretty obvious way, but,
Yeah,
you
just
know.
to continue to build the layers of these characters. Um, and like I said, obviously, jump in with thoughts you have. I'm going to move over to the next scene, which was the hospital, and
Oh,
Carol's
wait!
in. Oh, yeah.
You're gonna skip right over because isn't that where, like, Ross leaves, he goes to the bathroom, and then he comes back, and then she puts her
Yes,
head on his hand,
yes.
and
See,
then he's just like, "Oh, okay, I'll
I
just sit down because 'cause I'm not gonna move my hands."
I wrote down
And
Ross helps Rachel sweep, and I skipped right over it. What a pivotal moment in
yeah,
the show! I'm so glad you
yeah.
caught that. Yes.
Well, because
Um,
it that kind of previews everything, like,
yeah,
the whole Ross and Rachel and everything right
yeah. I
there
kind of
in that
loves the way that
one thing.
he offers to help, and then she just sits down. It's
But
brilliantly done.
oh, yeah, and that's so typical of both of their characters,
Yeah,
you know?
and it's kind of foreshadowing because what I'll probably butcher the quote, but what did she say about? Didn't you just think life be simple? You'd meet somebody and fall in love forever. As she's
Yeah.
leaning on his hand, right? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, and then he's just like and then he pulls the stool and just sits down because he's not going anywhere.
That's right. He's not moving his hands for anything.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
Mhm,
what a
mhm.
pivotal moment that is, that physical closeness.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, we move over to the hospital and let's see Carol's on the bed.
Mhm.
Ross comes in. Um, I
And it's
feel
just
that
awkward.
it's just awkward. It's weird, and something that I think it runs through the show because why wouldn't it? Because it was the '90s. There's still some sort of little stereotypical things that wouldn't necessarily be in a show today. I know there's an incident in next week's episode, but like where Susan and Ross shake hands, and he's like firm handshake. I'm assuming because she's a lesbian, he's making some kind of
Uh-huh.
loosely veiled homophobic joke that wouldn't be done now, but we have to look through this, of course, in the lens of the '90s, and these kind of jokes are throughout the entire show.
Oh, yeah.
But man alive, it was awkward. They're
Mm.
not knowing what to say, um, and
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 then he's
then
trying to be funny, and then it's like, yeah, that's and he'll quack, 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 and
yeah, yes, it's
it's
like
just
it's
like,
so
"Oh
awkward.
god."
Like he's trying to defuse the situation some any way he can,
Yeah, and it just
can't
makes
he?
everything worse, and then that's the end.
Yeah, because then they jump quickly over to Barry's dentist office. I think it's excuse me, the
Mhm.
first time we meet Barry,
Yes.
And it's a very quick scene. I forgot that this we jump from the hospital to Barry. We kind of go back and forth a few times. We see
Mhm.
Barry, and then suddenly he sees Rachel, and then he has to go and rescue a kid who's choking, I think.
Mhm.
And we're back in the hospital. And man alive, I've got feelings on this scene because they start discussing baby names. And why in the world Susan thinks she's got any reason, right, or reason to have her name at the
Right.
end of this child?
Right.
Right, I
Right.
hope I'm not wrong, and please tell me if you think I am, but that's so out of line,
Uh-huh.
right?
I think so too, because it's like, and Ross even says, what part do you have in all of this?
Yeah.
But that also goes back to how long were her and Susan together in a thing and making plans for their future
Right,
before Ross had any idea.
was this more planned out than we are led to
Mm.
believe? Um, yeah. Like I said, I
Mm.
think Susan redeems herself later on in some ways, but to me, this just it's a "how dare you" moment, like,
Right.
for that. But we go from there then straight back to the dentist where Barry reveals he went to Aruba with Mindy. Um,
Yeah.
now,
Later.
was he having an affair with Mindy while he and Rachel were together? That was established.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
She's like, "Mindy? My maid of honor, Mindy?" And he's like, "Yep,
Right.
well."
Yeah, Barry's not exactly making himself look great at this point. We've only just met him.
No.
I'm assuming plugs are where you have a bald patch and you got hair put in.
Yes.
I feel that might be kind of like antiquated technology almost now. I don't know if these do people still get plugs? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I have
Yeah,
no idea if that's still a thing or not, but that's exactly, I think everybody just shaves their head.
I think
But
so.
that's a
Yeah,
thing. But yeah, that used to be, you'd get hair plugs and they'd put in like patches of hair, and if they were cheap ones, then you could see like the patches. And then if they were
right.
better ones, yeah.
Because I
But
know I've got a coworker who's had a hair transplant where they took hair from the back of his head and put it towards the front. I didn't know if that was
whoa!
the same thing or if it's completely like I don't know. I would
Hmm,
have to. He's a cool guy. He's a co-worker, and he's very open about it. And actually shows his kids in class and stuff. Um,
that's
like
awesome. I
I'm
want to
sure.
meet that guy.
Yeah,
He
he's
sounds
awesome. I'm
cool.
sure
He
some
sounds
people try
cool.
to hide it and stuff, but he's like, no, I'm doing this. I'm too young to go bald. Look at my hair now, and he's got this
Yeah.
perfect hair. So I didn't know if it was the same thing or if it was a different thing.
Mm.
Um,
I really don't know, but I would imagine it's the same kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
But and at the at the end, oh, I'm jumping ahead. Never mind. My favorite line though,
yeah, no, you're good.
that makes me laugh so hard, is at the very end whenever she calls Mindy on the phone and she's like,
Yes,
I hope he's got, or I hope your kids have his old hairline and your old nose. And then she
right.
hangs up.
And considering she's had a nose
I
job
know.
too, I was like, that's a bold attack.
It
I kind of
sure
love that
is.
line because to me, I imagine that the quote unquote old Rachel from several weeks ago, who was getting married, wouldn't be so bold as to
Right.
kind of speak her mind like that. I kind of
Yeah.
feel it's some
But
growth.
now she's got a job. And then I also thought it was funny whenever she very first went in there, and then Barry, and she's like, "Oh, you look great. You're tan." And then
Yes.
she like takes her hair down and kind of tries to fix it up and all of that. Mm.
Yes,
And
I thought I
all,
saw a Wilson child behind you, but I think he went
I
away.
thought so. Yeah, I thought I saw him too. Hmm.
Yeah. No, yes, that was so interesting that and then he's already decided he's moved on, but he's a
Yeah.
bit of a train wreck, I think.
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For
But let's
sure.
see. We move from there again. We seem to go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was
Mm.
skipping ahead a few episodes whenever he's marrying Mindy Mai and Barry Yor, and whenever he's marrying Mindy, and then um all that
Yeah,
happens.
it gets very interesting, and then Mindy's ends up being played by two different characters or two different actresses, which for some
Interesting.
reason I didn't catch that until I started rewatching. this last time. We'll get into that when it happens. But
Later.
so we end up jumping back to the hospital where Susan says she wants the baby's name to be was a Willick Bunch, which thankfully Ross disagrees with and isn't
Right.
going along with that. I still think he should have been even farmer, but I think he still loves Carol. He
Mhm.
didn't choose this situation, like he says, so I still think he's got so much love for her. He's not going to be too pushy. I
Well,
would have been. Go ahead. Go
and
ahead.
he's not pushy, ever. I mean, about
Right.
anything. He's kinda like a noodle. Like, you know, I mean, even with the just across the board always, he doesn't ever really like, think about the sandwich thing later and all
Yes.
that, and he gets mad, and then he's finally gonna stand up, but, like, her take "Can I help you?" And here's the thing, and she sits down and, you know, it
Yes.
just he's kind of a yeah.
Yeah, he seems to be like generally he's kind of a pushover, and then sometimes he stands up and is kind of pushy about things he maybe shouldn't be. Like when
Mhm.
Rachel, say finally, when she gets her career, suddenly he gets a bit, I don't know, weird about some of that stuff, which of course we'll get to near the time.
Yeah.
But
Yep, yep.
sometimes he's a pushover, and other times he really wants to be kind of almost aggressive. But I think sometimes his timing might be a little off.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
but I don't. I think if he had walked out and not heard the heartbeat, he would have ended up coming back. I don't think he would be an absentee dad. I don't think
No.
Monica would have allowed that. Let
Well,
alone,
no.
you're right. She is going to be that aunt. Let alone the
Mhm.
fact I think he's a good guy. I think he would have been in his child's life. Which yeah, but his parents would want to be grandparents. Yeah, it wouldn't have lasted. I think just the emotion of it all got to him. Now, I asked Kate about this, and we ended up having to Google it earlier when we rewatched it. When would, and you'll know, having a couple of children, when do you hear a heartbeat roughly? Because it seems awfully early to me.
Okay, so it's not the heartbeat that's weird about
Right?
that because you hear the heartbeat, you can hear that pretty early on, but
Okay.
it's that sonogram picture actually kinda looks like a baby.
I didn't notice
You
that until today when I rewatched it before we called.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
no, no, it
It's like a
I
6 month sonogram picture, right? Like you see the
well,
head of
because
the.
it's not a perfect it's still kind of like a little blob. So I was thinking like 20 weeks. So like, you know, the 4 month, 5 month type mark.
Right.
Mm,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I know. Did Like I said, I maybe being a guy, I don't know. I didn't notice that until this rewatch this morning, and I was like, that
yeah.
seems again the timing of it all seems a little off. But that's interesting about the heartbeat,
Mhm.
because I'm obviously we're glad that Ross hears that and he comes back in, and everything else seems to kind of wash away.
Well, and my question is, I mean,
Hmm.
knowing that he's mid 20s, like, do you know that that's what you're hearing right then?
Right, as a first time,
Like, because
right?
I remember the first time I heard my kids, and it was like, "What is like, what?"
Yeah, what's
And,
going on here? How does this work?
right. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it looks like an old potato.
Yeah, it's just a
But
brilliant line.
yeah, but no. So, like, 4 months is what I would think, but
Yeah.
so that's weird.
Yeah, it's all
That
very interesting, and Carol's just recently moved out, right? I mean, that's the other thing. It's I don't know, the timeline's interesting. Maybe we'll need to deep dive into this
yeah, I think
a
so.
little bit. Again, 30 years ago when this was written, they probably weren't thinking, there's going to be people on the internet discussing this. But but here
But
we
here we
are.
are.
Here we are doing exactly that. And we kind of then, I guess, move into that great line of Rachel on Mindy, which I don't know. I was quite proud of her. I think it's
Uh-huh.
great when she fires those little shots, especially because it turns out later she had a nose job, I believe.
Yes.
So kind of the audacity of doing that, I think, is fantastic.
It is, but it's also right in line with her, where it's,
Yeah,
okay for me, but not for others, you
that's
know?
exactly right. Yeah,
Mhm.
that sort of slightly stereotypical rich girl, whatever,
Yes.
kind of
Uh-huh.
thing. Well, and then the episode kind of ends there, I think. But I'd love to hear if there was anything that you saw in this that was like new information to you on this rewatch, getting ready for the podcast, or just anything you thought was interesting when you rewatched it.
Well, the sonogram thing for sure. Like that was
Right,
I'm so glad you brought that up because yeah, that but the man, that the timeline situation. Like I'm ready to deep dive into that now. Like
right. So, like I said,
because
I've never really deep dived into Friends as much as I've loved it. I'm rewatching it before the podcast, and then my plan is to kind of deep dive afterwards.
yeah.
When I've talked to you and just kind of had this discussion and thinking about things through a different lens than just watching it, you know?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So something I looked into Anita Barone, who was the lady who played Carol for just this episode, and this was a little bit of a deep dive. She did this, and after recording this episode, she was offered a role on the Jeff Foxworthy show, and
Oh,
she had to do one or the other. I've never seen. I know who he is, of course, but I don't know the show. She thought that would be more stable. She thought that had a better future. So she chose to go onto the Jeff Foxworthy show and have a recurring role there and not do Friends because she didn't feel it was going to be as successful.
right.
Which,
Well, and she's a side character. And so she
it,
would have had no idea how big
right.
and important Carol ended up being.
Exactly. So
Ah,
while it seems perfectly understandable at the time, I'd be curious to find out if that's a regret of hers or if it ended up working out great, or you know how she feels about it now, with hindsight being 2020 and Friends being the huge thing that it obviously became.
right. Okay. Ooh, I have a piece of just random knowledge.
Yes,
Okay, so you know the Rembrandt song at the beginning. The
yes,
okay, and it started off just being the theme song. And then they liked the theme song so much they went back to the Rembrandts and asked them to flesh it out into an entire song. Um, but the opening credits, this episode was the first one that set the stage for the whole rest of the series, like where they do the montage of the fountain and the pieces from the episodes because they didn't like
really.
them frolicking around in the fountain the entire time because they felt like it portrayed them to be elitist and like they, not who they wanted their characters to be in the show.
That's
So,
really interesting. I didn't know that at all. I've seen the original introduction when the show was going to be called Friends Like Us,
uh huh.
which has it's not U2, REM, I think was
Yes.
originally going to be this. I've seen that, but I didn't know that. It's interesting you bring that up because I've thought a bit about trying to like track something through this podcast. And I thought about tracking the amount of coffees that people drink all the way through the show. But I
Uh-huh.
Googled it and it's been done. You can find out how many cups of coffee Chandler drinks. It's There's charts have been made. And then I thought, well, maybe we'll track certain phrases or something. But it might be interesting to look at the introduction for each episode because I know it changes all the time.
Uh-huh.
Just to see what little clips they use. Maybe that's something we'll think about
See,
doing.
and I would be
Yeah,
interested if they show the same because you stream it, right?
yeah, we watch it almost always on HBO Max, or
Okay.
exclusively on HBO or Max. It's now called. Yeah,
Okay, and so I dug out my old DVDs.
yes,
And so I'm curious if the beginnings because I know whenever they were streaming like Dawson's Creek, they changed the opening sequence
really.
through the streaming service. Mhm.
That would be interesting to see. So, as I mentioned, Steve and I originally bonded years ago over Frasier. And every beginning of Frasier, they just have a 3 or 4 second little clip of the Seattle skyline, and
Mhm.
They add something slightly to every episode. And there's one random episode where in the US and the UK it's different on the DVDs. Every other one is the same, and
Interesting.
we don't know what. There's no rhyme or reason that anyone knows of. But that might be interesting to look at the DVDs versus the streaming.
Hmm.
And I know in the UK that some of the episodes cut out certain jokes when they're shown on the television,
Mhm.
whereas they don't do that here, I don't believe. So that'd be interesting to compare your DVDs to me streaming it and see what's the same and what's different.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
is
we should
fun.
do that. And then, was
Okay.
there any character? I like to think of this section as the Gunther Central Park, because I just love that name. Section. Was there any actor or character in this episode that stood out to you in particular?
Okay, so I have an unpopular opinion, or maybe it's popular. I don't know. I don't care for Ross. I think he's a wiener. But I mean, I do. But I really like him in this episode because, and it's not so much him, but the actor that plays him, because he does such a good job of making him just so Eeyore-ish,
Yeah,
you
that's the
know?
perfect word to
And then
describe him. Yes.
yes, just and I mean, and that's hateful of me. I mean, he's going through a lot. His character's going through a lot right now and everything else, but he just does a really good job.
I wonder if, and we all, I guess have had this moment in our life. He seems to be the golden child, and he went to
Mhm,
college and then just PhD, and his life is, it would appear, has been just very successful, and I wouldn't want to say easy, but without a lot of trouble. And so maybe
mhm,
this is the first time in his life that he's really dealing with some adversity that wasn't part of the master plan of education, good job, married, but the stereotypical linear life
yeah,
progression maybe lots of people are expected to do.
yeah,
So he does. Eeyore's the perfect way to describe him. Hi, and all
yeah.
that stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right. I kind of like him and Monica. No, for me, nobody really stood out in this episode as being, phenomenal character. But I like the dynamic of the two of them kind of dealing
Mhm,
with the parents. I feel for the character of Monica quite a bit.
mhm.
Seems like just nothing she can do is ever going to be good enough, and having to live poor Monica living in Ross's shadow the whole time.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the two of them, the way they play off each other.
Oh, yeah, and then he puts it all out there just to kind of save her from this awkward
Right.
situation. It still backfires, and then at the very end, whenever "Are you welling up?" Whenever she's, getting all teary-eyed about the baby and stuff. It is a good relationship. It
Yeah,
really
and
is.
I was just thinking about their relationship, and I'm reading far too deeply into something that's absolutely nothing. But when Ross was about to tell his parents about Ben and Carol and all of that, Monica's digging her elbow into his hand on the table. What does she say? Something like, "Don't you have news to share or something to
Uh-huh.
share?" And she's digging, and then it's the very next scene that you brought up, where Rachel is leaning her hand gently, leaning her head on his hand on the
Oh,
couch.
huh,
Probably nothing in it, but two scenes
huh.
in a row, his hand is getting hurt by Monica,
I
and
was
then
gonna
kind of
say it's being physically abused.
right. So I don't know, probably nothing in it, but these are the kind of minutia that we might dive into and kind of discuss and just see what
Yeah,
happens.
that's so fun. I love that.
Yeah. Well, kind of on that note, as this podcast grows, we're hoping to add some more sections. I think it'd be fun to look at the introduction, but also hopefully we'll start getting some listener mail, where people who are listening can send in their thoughts, and we'd love for everyone to get in touch. And the best way to do that is going to be through our new Instagram page. If you just look up the Purple Door Podcast, you'll find us there and you can send us a message. We'd love to build a small community around this pod and have all of you guys involved. But on that note, DeeAnn, have you got any final thoughts about this episode?
Um, this
No
is a good
pressure.
one. Yeah, no
Yeah.
pressure. No, it's a good one. It's a good one. It really kind of sets the stage for things that are happening, and I'm still just kind of reeling over deep diving into what the heck is Susan's deal.
Right. Well, I know what we're both going to be doing this evening. So that's
Right.
awesome. Right. Well, next week, Steve is going to be back for another episode, and he and I are going to be discussing the one with the thumb. But on that note, DeeAnn, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. This has been fantastic.
It's been so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and thank you everyone for tuning in to the Purple Door podcast.